All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Doug and Carmi Show. Your one-stop shop for all things Commanders. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the little like button so you never miss an episode like today with our good buddy Emory Hunt. Emory, how are you, man?
I'm doing fine, man. It's always a pleasure to be on the show.
I told you one of my favorite days of the year, and I wasn't lying. The football game plan came back out this year with another incredibly exhaustive draft guide. You're doing all the work on CBS Sports HQ. Do you ever? And I was getting ready to talk to you a little bit about college. And I wanted to get to the draft, but before we do that, I'm getting ready to say, when do you ever take a break? But I know the answer. You don't ever take a break. I saw you up at 7 in the morning doing European football.
Yeah, man. Listen, this
You might
this
have a problem, Emory.
I might have one, man. It's what's cool about the ELF European League of Football. It's in its fifth year. It's my second year calling those games, and I'm excited about it because it's my first time doing pro games. But it's a little bit unique because it's a solo broadcast, so I'm doing play-by-play, which I've never done, which I'm getting experience doing now. And my normal role as a color analyst, but trying to do both at the same time is always fascinating and unique. And what's cool about the ELF, just to wax poetically about it a little bit, 16 teams across countries in Europe, and the cool part about it is you're only allowed four Americans on a roster. Two can be on the field at the same time. So this is a truly homegrown league, and you have some NFL coaches over there. Jim Tom Sula's over there, Jack Del Rio. And so, you have an opportunity to see how these countries develop, cultivate their talent, and put together a pro league. And I think it's phenomenal. Some teams you may recognize, like the Ryan Fire, Berlin Thunder, those old NFL Europe teams. And I like that it's growing consistently every year. And we're seeing more and more opportunities for those guys. I kind of low-key think the NFL got rid of NFL Europe too soon, because imagine how what we see now with this league blossoming, if they were still connected over there with their own European league, this thing would be even bigger.
The roster construction and the players allowed to the side, what's the biggest difference between what they're doing over here and what we're over there versus what we're doing here? Like, say, the college and the NFL game, both football, but obviously very distinctly different by some of the rules, that like the hash marks. What are there things like that in Europe that they're doing differently than we're doing in the NFL here?
No, it's actually more NFL slash college type rules. The hash marks are NFL based. The overtime is more like the collegiate overtime. They do now the modified kickoff, which we've seen now in the NFL, UFL, XFL, like that. They do those things. So the rules are the same. It's just, I think the biggest difference from what I've seen so far and following the league for the 5 years it's been in existence is O-line, D-line play. And that's no different than what you're seeing at the SEC level versus the Sun Belt level versus the Missouri Valley Conference level, right? It's always the difference at the highest of levels is always going to be in the trenches. But we're seeing every year, I've seen the talent kind of grow and grow and grow. So they're trending in the right direction.
Hey, you said how many games for 16 teams? How many games?
I want to say 10 games. 10 games. You have
Okay.
the postseason, and the season ends, I want to say, first or second week of the NFL regular season. So early September is when their season ends.
And we're talking what, Germany, England, Spain. Who else is in there?
There's
France,
like seven
maybe?
teams in Germany. There's teams in Austria. Teams new team now is in Denmark. Copenhagen is the Nordic Storm. You had two teams last year in Spain. You had Madrid and the Barcelona Dragons, but the Dragons have bowed out this season. So there's only the Madrid Bravos. You had a team in Italy last year, the Milano Seamen, who's on hiatus this year, but they're coming back next year. England doesn't have a team yet. I know people are pushing for them to have a London team or a team in Ireland or even two teams in the UK. You have a Switzerland team in Helvetic. So you see a bunch of teams popping up, but Germany is strong with seven teams in that country.
I saw we have a bunch of Commanders fans in England, so I know their love for the NFL there. Of course, the first guy, and you know this, the first game ever televised in England was the Super Bowl between the Redskins and the Dolphins.
Mhm.
Um, but Ireland had, I think outside of America, Ireland has like the largest NFL viewership anywhere else in the world. So that would be interesting if they were to able to get a club over there because I know they're super hungry for the action. Okay, let's move on to college here just a little bit. As we see more of the players being able to make good money, how do you think it affects the draft in the future? I'm thinking like a guy like Shador Sanders. I wonder if he wishes he'd have gone back for 10 million bucks or whatever it was going to come his way. How many guys that are fringe first and second rounders are going to end up staying because the money's better?
I think it's more affecting the guys that are day three guys. If you're
Okay.
getting that advisory board, I don't know if they're going to continue to do that, but if the advisory board is telling you go back to school, they're going to go back to school. Because think about this. I brought this up 3 years ago, where
Okay.
I said a guy like at the time Stetson Bennett and DJ Uiagalelei. I felt like those two guys are, obviously the NFL is going to bypass a Stetson Bennett because his height and whatnot. And DJ Uiagalelei has kind of flatlined at the time he was at Clemson. I was like, man, it's probably best for him just to go to the UFL at the time, the XFL/USFL. It was two separate leagues. Go there, play pro ball, and then let the league reevaluate you from there. Make money as a pro. But this was before the real NIL started to open up. Even though he was one of the first ones to get NIL, him and Quinn Ewers. Because we had the
Mhm.
Dr. Pepper commercial.
That's right.
So but for guys that are on the fringe, like, man, you're not either. There's two options. Either you are going to, try to your luck to go to a spring league where obviously you'll take a cut and pay, but at least you're getting pro tape. But that would also require these spring leagues to expand teams and create more opportunities for those guys to do that. Or, which we'll see a lot of guys do. If I'm on a fringe anyway, I'm gonna just stay back and just get as much money as I can. So now, whether I go to the NFL and get cut after the preseason, and whatever money I made in the signing bonus, I already had that in the nest egg based on what I made in college. So I think you'll see guys that are now for sure first or second round picks. And we know the Shador Sanders case wasn't even about football. That was clearly a guy that had first round talent. So him going in round 5 is just for other reasons. So for guys that, let's say like Dylan Gabriel, he came out after year 6, and I know they're trying to put a cap on the year of guys staying in college, but if you are able to stay for 4 to 5 years and you're not a first, it's almost going to be like basketball where you're almost like, wow, you're a senior. Ugh. Why are you staying in school so long, right? When we know the guys tend to come out after 1 year. I think we'll see that happen in football where they'll probably look at guys that have stayed 4 to 5 years. It's like, all right, well, maybe he's a day 3 guy anyway. And if you're going to be a day 3 guy anyway, stay as long as you can and rack up the money.
Is the league looking at quarterbacks differently? I'm thinking as far as, it was not that long ago when teams were taking flyers on guys like Anthony Richardson and saying, I can develop them. Look at the traits. But you and I both know that once you get to the NFL, they have very little time to be developing players. That's not actually how it works. And of course, they're not worried about developing you in college that much either because the head coach there has to win. It feels like the NFL is making a switch to going back to quarterbacks that have a certain amount of snaps as the threshold. And you've seen that be more successful recently. Do you think that's a trend heading in a different direction, or just happens to be what's played out the last couple of years?
I think it just so happens to be what has happened. I think what the smoke needs to be on these front offices and these coaches. Turn off social media, stop getting influenced by what you've been reading, and just do what the job requires you to do. If you're the coach, be the coach, which also involves you developing guys at the pro level. We expect you to be advanced in that development. If you're scouting or a GM at the pro level, hey man, focus on building the right roster, working with your head coach, and stop trying to deflect blame. Because we know Anthony Richardson has talent, but you'll see a bad game, and now the coach is kind of deflecting blame, like we got to win games because my job. And then the GM is like, well, it's our, we gave you talent, you got to coach. Like both guys are trying to kick the blame out. Like, how about both you guys own his development, work with him and see him on the other side when he grows and blossoms, a la a Josh Allen. That's where you saw a GM and a coach on the same page and development happen. And that's something that we can see as a tangible pathway for a lot of players, right? And so when we have a lot of people, you walk into any of these pro facilities, TVs all over the place, right? What's on the TVs? Networks and
Yeah.
argumentative television.
First takes. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So if all you walking in the facility and all you see is like after week one is Caleb Williams' job on the line. Is this a make or break year for Caleb Williams? In year two, it's like, bro, what are we doing? You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? And I think everybody's got rabbit ears. Focus on the job at hand. This guy just didn't forget how to play football. Coach him up, get talent around him, go win some ball games. And that's, I think, what people have to focus on.
As we continue through this NIL era and college football seemingly reshapes itself into something different, will we get to the point where they will do a better job of marrying the two games? I brought it up earlier, and we talked about this before. The games are both football, but the way you play the game are so entirely different because of the way fouls are set up. I'm thinking about like cornerbacks and being able to grab on jerseys and the PIs. Like I remember Fred Smoot one time saying, if they let us do that in the NFL, I'd grab a guy every time for 15 yards, right? You just can't let guys do that. The hash marks, the way they're set up, totally changed the way an offense is played because the NFL essentially uses college football as a feeder league. Will they at some point, as they are reshaping college football, get to a point where the two sports look more similar?
Or, and I agree with you, you know what I'm saying? We've seen it done before. The NFL kind of hemmed and hawed and took them about a couple of decades before they got around to adding the 2-point conversion.
Yeah.
So what if the NFL, and again, NFL hemmed and hawed about certain guys being allowed to play quarterback a certain way, and then they saw
Shanahan had to go get the RPO from Browse for Robert, right?
and hell, we saw, and it's funny because who created the RPO was Damon Allen in the CFL, Marcus Allen's brother.
Okay.
And they never even gave him that much of an opportunity to come down and play in the NFL. But so imagine if NFL was like, what if they widened their hash marks as opposed to college narrowing theirs, right? Because what happens with the hash marks, and I can see it both ways. So if the NFL wants to, help these guys adjust easier to the pro game, then the hash marks will be wider. Or if they want to, force guys to get ready for the NFL, the college hash marks will narrow in, because the difference between the hash marks and why you see the hit or miss nature with quarterbacks, when you get those hash marks that are closer, and I said this since 2008, the real brass tacks comes down to how can you handle pressure. And you won't know that from a collegiate quarterback until he gets to the pros, when those hash marks are closer, everybody's in the middle of the field, pressure happens quicker. Can you deal with that type of pressure? Some guys get it at the collegiate level early based on what they see, which is why I was a big fan of how a guy like Jaden Daniels handled pressure, or Shador Sanders, despite the offensive line, handle pressure. Some situations are different, but when you see some guys in college that never got touched and everything was always easy, then when they get to the pro game, you see them struggle with just a simple cat blitz. Well, you can help that by either forcing college to narrow theirs or widening yours as a pro. But at the end of the day, I kind of like it keeping it separate, because it makes it truly a unique game. But if the NFL is worried about quarterback development, then something's going to have to be done in that regard.
Well, and it's not just the quarterback development. I'm thinking of like, it feels like more and more each year we get offensive tackles that the league feels like probably are better at guard. And while I appreciate the sentiment, I remember Green Bay Packers did that forever, right? They drafted tackles, that was it, and then taught him to play guard because they wanted the athleticism. Do we have a tackle problem? Because it feels like the number of pro-ready tackles that teams are interested that hit all the benchmarks become lesser and lesser every year. And if so, I'd ask why.
I think what we're seeing is, guys are playing allowing guys to play where they're best at or where they're most comfortable, right? Because we're also seeing, and remember how we used to always see quarterbacks that was only 6'4", 6'5", and
Yes.
then we start to see the 6'3" guy kind of become, and now it doesn't even matter anymore. Like you're getting guys from 5'11" to 6'2", and that's kind of like you're getting a shorter quarterback. I think we're getting a shorter tackle, because those guys that were of 6'4", um, 6'5", 310, they were automatically thrown inside at guard anyway. And
Right.
now, and just letting this guy play tackle, and he's thriving at tackle, right? Even with the armlet debate, we're seeing guys with shorter arms play tackle, and some are able to continue to do that at the pro level, while some are not able to handle that down to down consistency. I think what's happening along the offensive line is more schematic as opposed to development, because of how quick the ball comes out at the collegiate level. A lot of just quick boom, boom, boom. Like these guys not really getting enough time on task in terms of seeing edge rushers or pass rushers, right? More so the interior guys are seeing more work
Right.
than the exterior guys. And I think that's all just schematic, man. So once teams get back to running the football at the collegiate level, which probably, we'll probably see it swing a little bit. It always is cyclical.
Yep.
We'll see teams get back to running the football. We'll see more eye formations, or at least broken eye or power eye, however you want to call it. Strong or weak formations, as opposed to these spread with these wide splits. I think right now we're in this era, and because of that, we're seeing that evolution of those players. And then when we get back to, interior offensive line, tighter formations, running game, we'll see that on both sides of the line of scrimmage. We'll see bigger defensive ends. We'll start to see, the bigger backers come back in vogue. So we'll see this kind of swing back in the other way. And then after we talk about that, after like 2 decades, we'll see it swing back the other way as well.
Yeah, I've been saying this for a couple of years, but I thought maybe 2 years from now we'd see that in the NFL. But you can already see that the league has said, I think it started maybe last year, that if you're going to put 245-pound linebackers on the field and run five safeties at me, then we're going to run the ball right up the middle of the field all the time. They weren't willing to do that 2 years ago. Everybody was still set on the spreads and let's throw as many times as we can. But I think you could already see the shift a little bit in the NFL, because you're right. It's a check me, check you league. Is the smaller that the defensive players are getting, the big, that's when the Derrick Henry starts shining. I thought it would be another year or two. I think it's happening right now.
Especially when you think about it's coaches, especially play callers, are all about ego. And so the challenge was always, how much are you committed to staying with the run game or staying with what is working? When we know a lot of guys just get antsy, like, man, all right, we ran the ball 5 times in a row and it's working, but man, I just got to get a pass in here somewhere. Like, nah, bro, keep running the ball. Like,
yes.
You know what I'm saying?
All right, let's look at the draft a little bit. Were there, I'm curious, like some big surprises for you guys that you had really high on your board that went really low, and vice versa?
For me, I think the biggest take, obviously, the Shador Sanders thing was more about ancillary things in his play. So that's a given, right? I talked about that ad nauseum. But one of my biggest takeaways, I thought everybody killed the draft. Like it's
There were a lot of good
fascinating.
drafts. Yes.
Yeah, across the board. I'm looking at now again, I don't know if this was the result of the last batch of COVID prospects, but as I'm matching draft classes with guys that I had grades on in the draft guide, I'm looking at, like, damn, this is a good player in round 7. Like I had a 78 grade on a guy that they picked in round 7, or wow, this is my 10th offensive tackle that went in round 4. And man, all of these teams are getting very good football players. It's bittersweet for me because it was like, damn, this is this was a great draft. And then you look at some of the priority free agents they signed. Oh wow, they got great players. But then the realization kicks in, like, man, there's only so many spots. Like, so they can't keep all these guys. And so we'll see a batch of very good potential starter type football players not be on rosters or be relegated to the practice squad, which, going back to earlier in our conversation, creates the need for either expanded rosters in the NFL or expanded teams in a UFL. Or I wrote this article back in 2016 that the NFL is already set up to do its own developmental league. Right?
Yes.
You bring in 90 guys to camp, you're cutting 45.
There it is.
That's your roster right there. You know what I'm saying? Like, you keep those guys in house. As I always ask Brian Daboll this, or even any Giants head coach, because I'm covering the Giants a lot when I'm out here at the training camps and mini camps. To a man, they always say, man, I really wish I could continue to work with these guys, because you just spent all summer and spring working with 90 guys, and you may see a guy that's like your fifth running back and like, oh, I like this guy, man. He's growing, he's developing, but you can only keep 3. And it's like, I don't want to lose this guy, but we have to trim this roster down. Well, imagine if you didn't have to trim the roster down. You can keep those guys. You probably even can add more coaches that you want to continue to develop as coaches. That's your roster. And all of these teams are now streaming their own original content on their websites anyway. There's your opportunity to stream a spring game or a game with your spring roster, with another team's spring roster. And so if you have to call somebody up mid-season, they're already in football shape. They know your system. It makes it's too much. It makes too much sense for it to ever happen. So that's why
it would be simple. It feels like that is a simple fix.
Right? It's an easy fix, right? So, and it helps you grow another market where, let's say you have the Washington Commanders and their B team plays in,
Virginia
Bethesda, Virginia Beach.
True.
Right. It's like right there. You know what I'm saying? Like, you could play in the stadium, develop a new market, call them, the Virginia Beach Admiral or whatever, right? And so it kind of keeps it in the same. You keep the same color scheme, but it's like, it just makes too much sense, because, man, imagine now you got a guy, Washington got an undrafted rookie free agent and Carlin Vigors, fantastic corner out of UL Monroe.
Yeah, they're high on him.
Very high on him, right? Had a great Hula Bowl. You go watch his game against Texas, against those receivers. He held his own, did really well. Man, but he has an uphill battle, and you hope he gets to make the 53. And so that's the issue when you have such a deep, good draft, that, at the end of the day, some of these guys are going to end up trying to find ways to stay on a roster, whether it's at a practice squad level or in, some starting capacity.
Which poses the question, why does a team like Philadelphia keep 12 draft picks?
Bro, they do a great job. Here's what I
They
like.
do, but to your point, you can't keep all 12. There's no way. The roster's already too good anyway.
And what they do is smart, because they tend to draft. If I'm a vet, I'm looking at this. You got to start looking at this like in a savvy way.
Okay.
Because, man, if they drafted guys at a position that I play, I'm a good starter. I'm starting right now, but they drafted a D tackle that was a really good college player. Oh, I'm out the door in 2 years. Like, you know what I'm saying? They just drafted my replacement, and that's what they do. So the guys that they draft now, we'll be saying like week 8, like, man, how come so-and-so ain't playing? And next thing you know, in 2026, so-and-so is going to be starting, and then the other guy is gone. So they drafted, developed, cultivated, and that's how they're able to keep this thing rolling. And when you draft well every year, you're always going to be able to have the next guy up that you are not worried about as a starter. So you're never going to get caught, like, with your pants down, so to speak, right? So you're going to always have a plan. And that's how I think drafting is supposed to be. Like, you're supposed to never have, oh, we lost this guy. Cool. Well, we got this guy coming up. He was an all whatever performer. He fits our scheme well. He spent the year behind this guy that got injured or we had to move on from because of the contract. And now he's ready to go because he knows the system, he's developed, and he's ready to go. And I think that's how you can kind of keep the train rolling down the track.
We'll use this as a segue. That was the antithesis of the Commanders draft, where they took very minimal players, but I think they got really good value on all of them. Let's start with the first one, They might have had bigger needs than a tackle if we assume that Josh Connolly goes over to play right tackle. I'd suggest that by doing that, they allowed Brandon Coleman to go to his more natural spot at left guard, thereby increasing two positions in a division where there is a lot of pass rush and the lines are important. Were you surprised? Because there will be some that say they had a bigger need at, let's say, defensive end, and there were some defensive ends on the board. I think the best ones have been taken, but there were some that I know they liked that were still there. Uh, Good value to pass on those guys for a guy like Josh Cotterly. And I'm curious your thoughts on him. I've been told by several people if he went back to school last year and came out, he's more like a top 10 pick.
Doug, you've been following the game for a while, and we hear the same things every year, right? So, what we gonna hear around week 7 or 8? You know what I'm saying? Like, man, there's not a it's man, it pays to have a good offensive line because there's not a lot of those big guys out there that can play. So if you get a good, if you see one that's valuable and good, get him. So I had no issue with Washington taking Connolly because you're going to need him at some point. And the fact that you're getting a guy that can play tackle, we know how everyone screams about there's only 5 good tackles in the world that can play this position, like always hyperbole, right? So if this could be number 6, damn it, I'm gonna get number 6. Like, I'm not gonna sit there and wait to get somebody else. Every year y'all scream about there's not enough linemen out there. Well, here's a good one. I'm getting a good one right now, right? Whether he starts right now for us, that doesn't matter. We have him on our roster. He's a good talent. He played high-level football in the Power Conference. He's checking all these boxes. We're grabbing him. And like you said, which is a lot of times people miss, it helps strengthen 2 spots because now a guy that may have been playing out of position adequately can now play where he's stronger at inside. So now you really have fortified the offensive line. And can you imagine a situation where you're giving Jaden Daniels more time to find guys deep down the field? Like, that seems like a win-win, right? So,
and the third round pick they didn't have you essentially was Laramie Tunsil. So I mean, when you add him into the mix, that offensive line's looking really good. Tyler Biadasz, I think, got not nearly enough credit for when he was on the field last year. Sam Cosmi comes back at some point early in the season. And you got a 5-man line that looks like it competes with just about anybody in the league.
And I know college scouting is different than pro scouting, but just going back to my college report on Biadasz was my number 1 center back when no one had him as the number 1 center. And so I love it. And so that's the thing. Like, sometimes you kind of have to project a little bit forward and wait things out. But yeah, they fortified their offensive line. And so when you think about Amos, the cornerback, that's an example in reverse of Connolly, right? So they're saying if Connolly goes back, he would have been a top 10 pick. Well, Amos went back and it didn't work. You know what I'm saying? And so people was like, well, oh, wow. They weren't talking about Amos during the season because they still had the bad taste of how he played at Alabama in their mouth. But then they started to realize, like, no, this guy really is playing very well this year. So his stock kind of got elevated in the eyes of the media. And so you find a way to get him, and boom, now you've added a guy that has experience at multiple levels. Started out as a raging Cajun. I have to bring it up because at the end of the day, we do a great job of finding and cultivating talent. And so, but he goes to Alabama, then goes to Ole Miss, and now you got that guy, right? And so watching Washington get good football players, quality football players, and we know this, it's the bell curve when we talk about the NFL. We're marketing this much, right? Which are the star players. The league is here in the middle. It's a solid football player league. You know what I'm saying? And we always talk about the guys that, flamed out or didn't work out. But the league is really made by good football players right there in the middle, right? And so if you're getting good football players, like Jalen Lane was a very good wide receiver that they got out of Virginia Tech. Madrano, I was a big fan of out of UCLA. Krosky Merritt. I said this last year during the season, like, man, if you had an explosive back with Jaden Daniels, a lot of these runs that were like 5 or 6 yard runs would be 30-yard runs. Merritt is the guy that can give you that 30-yard run.
Where does Merritt go if he played last year? More like a 4th rounder?
Probably so. If he played a full season, he probably goes in because he probably starts out at the Senior Bowl as opposed to, having to gut it out at the Hula Bowl, then going to the East West Shrine Bowl, he probably ends up being a Senior Bowl guy right out of the gate. So he's already going to be elevated in the eyes of scouts. So that's another, people forget he had the eligibility issue where he didn't play. Um,
Yep.
and man, or even if he had he stayed at New Mexico and played a season there as opposed to transferring, he probably ends up being a fourth round pick. So those is like that's why I always tell folks, like, when you look at where guys, don't look at where they're drafted. Yeah, that may change how teams view the expectation, but players know when you get out there on the practice field, you can't hide cold. And if this dude's cold, players will be like, hey man, this dude over here needs to play. And so you're gonna get that. So don't pay attention to where you're drafted. It's about who you're drafted to, and just go out there and just play football, and it'll work itself out.
I really think I've said this several times. I think by week 6, 7, 8, he probably leads this team in touches from the running back spot. He does everything they want to do in this offense. I'm curious, two things. If we get back to Connerly, I'm curious your thoughts on how it fixes the way Cliff's able to call offensive games. I wonder how much of the playbook got thrown out last year because of how quickly they had to get the ball out of Jaden Daniels' hands. Let's start there.
Connerly I'm looking up his scout report. I have him as my number 10 offensive tackle. Right off the bat, first rip. Very good athleticism to play, to be able to recover quickly if the defender gets a jump. And we know that's going to be paramount for a tackle that is blocking for a mobile quarterback. You're going to have to do more than what's drawn up on a whiteboard. You're going to have to dance a little bit. Yes. And you got a guy that can dance a little bit, and chase guys around and be able to readjust and get back in good position to hold his block. So if I was able to notice that off the first bullet point of his strengths, he's able to show he's effectively able to run the hoop with these edge rushers that's going to try to beat him around the edge. Well, I can run with you too. So now we just vacated the whole lane. You allow Jaden Daniels to step up. And if you're good on the move, you're good athletically like Connerly is, now your boot and waggle game, which we know Jaden Daniels does a good job in throwing on the run. So we can call more plays that get him out on the perimeter, to get him out of the move, and you trust the protection front side. Front side pressure is worse than anything for a quarterback, because especially a right-handed guy, because it takes away your ability to really set up and drive the football. Most teams are right-handed anyway. And the fact that he has played consistently, strong hands, they're quick. So that's the other part too, that people, we spent so much time talking about arm length. Yeah, long arms is great to have, but if you can't get those long arms on the defender quickly, then they're useless. You know what I'm saying? So the fact that he has strong, quick hands with the length is perfect. So there's a lot to like about him. And he was blocking for a shorter quarterback. He was blocking for an athletic quarterback, which all of that now makes sense when you think about everything that was surrounding him at Oregon. And now he's able to step in, be a plug and play guy, in my opinion, for the Commanders.
Two more before we get you out of here. We talked about Connerly upgrading 2 spots. I think Trey Amos did the same thing, allows them to get Sanders back into the nickel, where I'm assuming they really want him, allows them to have Lattimore on one side, Trey Amos on the other side, and Sanders. Do you like that thought process? Or did you, or if you're Adam Peters, did you say, you know what? We didn't think Sanders could play outside, or at least that wasn't the plan. He did. Let's not throw that away.
Well, you kind of want to keep yourself open to possibilities, because sometimes the situation may call for him to be on the outside, because you may face a team that wants to put their bigger wide receiver on the inside, right? Okay, cool. We got a big corner. Now we can match physicality on the inside without giving up, that size advantage if we put Sanders on the inside guy that's a bigger receiver. But with Amos, he was my number 2 boundary corner. So I kind of like him on the outside, right? Yes. First line of his scout report, top tier football IQ. Give me smart football players 10 times out of 10. They are extension of the coaching staff out there on the field. Amos is that guy. Technically sound, fundamentally sound, smart. So now you can say you look at this division: Pickens, CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, Neighbors, and whomever the Giants are going to try to put on the outside opposite of him, right? So how can we match up, if you're thinking like a Commanders coach? How can we match up versus 2 number ones, more specifically in Dallas or more specifically in Philly, while you have now guys that you feel like have number 1 potential at corner? You saw Sanders still hold his own, and now you have a young guy in Amos that has played his best football at the highest of levels. As people love to, if this is supposed to be the best conference in college football, he's one of the best corners. I don't hear anything about he didn't go up against some top tier competition, not only at practice but also in the SEC. And Amos, to me, did a great job at the Senior Bowl. A great job, bouncing back at Alabama. Gives you options on how you can kind of move pieces around defensively if you're the Commanders.
This team, this organization has been in GM purgatory for 2 decades. Adam Peters comes in. One of the things I really liked, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, as they went through the draft, the very first pick, you saw that Cliff Kingsbury wrote the note, said, please draft Connerly. They go Connerly. You go down a little bit, they showed the video when they drafted Lane, the special teams coordinators pointing, pumping, basically saying thank you. They did the same thing with Madrano, and then eventually the running backs coach, Anthony Lynn, with the last pick. We're not used to seeing so much involvement throughout the organization to make these picks. It's a breath of fresh air for us. How many teams are doing it like that, realistically?
Maybe if I was to be, some people say I am a little bit too Pollyanna. You'd like to think every team is doing that, right? Because just like we talked about this whole developmental league that we solved the NFL's problem in like 2 minutes, you would think it's like GM works with the head coach, works with all the coaches. What do you need? Let me go find what you need, and let's draft what you need to make you better as a coach, to make you win as a coach, to make us look good as like you would think everybody does that, right?
Yes.
And it's funny because, and that's a good question, because a lot of times when I'm out on the road, you kind of fit certain players to certain teams. You're like, oh, this dude would thrive at
right.
One guy in particular, undrafted free agent. I'm at the HBCU Legacy Bowl, Robert McDaniel. I'm sitting there watching the guy. I'm like, yo, he'd fit perfect in Tampa or in Washington. Lo and behold,
that's the safety.
Right? So it's like, man, this is, this makes sense. I hope they sign Gabe Taylor, because there was another guy I was like, oh, he'd be perfect in Washington, not just because of his brother, but because of, how they use Sam Steele and they love smart football players. He's another one that's a smart football player. So yes, you hope that GMs are working with coaches, because this is where you get into trouble, and this is across corporate America as a whole, where egos are what kill teams from being great, organizations from being great, companies from being great. And some people don't know how to play the number two. Some people don't. Everybody wants to be the king, and in order to be a great leader, you have to be a great follower. But if your GM and your head coach are butting heads, and the coaches say like, I rather an athletic quarterback that can be a +1 in the run game. GM is like, nah, I kind of like the classic drop back pocket passer, 1, 2, 3, get the ball out. It's like, and so you get this guy. I can't win with this guy. The team is set up to not do what I do as a head coach well, even though I'm trying to work through it and coach the best I can with what I'm not as comfortable doing. Now everything is in flux and we both get fired. So, but if you have unison, I called it synergy from top to bottom. I brought this up in a tweet, I think last year when we talked about Detroit. Head coach, GM, scouts, everybody's on the same page. You're seeing that now at Washington, where it's no longer dysfunction. It's everybody's on the same page on what we need as an organization to be successful. The head coach can't be successful if we're not getting him the players. Players can't be successful if they're not able to execute what the coach is coaching. And so we got to go out there as scouts and find these guys. And as a GM, we got to filter through, okay, personality-wise, who's the best fit for the football team and building a roster. And let's go get these guys so we can make everybody have success. And we're seeing this now in Washington. This is back-to-back years where they've knocked it out of the park draft-wise.
Were they able to close the gap with Philadelphia? Did they close it at all?
They've gotten closer, but Philly is still outpacing everybody because of how they're built on both sides of the line of scrimmage. So we won't answer that question about Washington until we see them play football. Because we've seen Philly on paper and also in practice and I'm talking about in practice, talk about in the regular season, um, execute flawlessly along both sides of the line of scrimmage. That's where you have to catch up with Philly. Everything else, Jaden and Jalen, you know what I'm saying, depends on which one. Jaden is right there with Jalen. Um, Obviously, you lean more toward Philly with receivers, backfield, with Philly. But in terms of like defensively, there's pieces that I kind of like Washington a little bit more so than Philly. But if you're gonna catch up to the Eagles, we have to see how good the O line and D line is, because that's bar none. First and foremost, what teams got to catch up.
Emory Hunt, you are the best, buddy. I always appreciate the time, and keep up the grind, brother. You're the best. Seriously.
Appreciate you, Doug. Always a pleasure, man. Good to see you continue to grind and do great things with this show.
Thank you, buddy. Until next time, we'll see you.